Hey, welcome back to the Disney Plus Everyday Challenge. And today we have the classic Peter Pan. This is from 1953. It's an hour and 20 minutes long, and we've watched a lot of classic Disney stuff over the last week or so. We did Lady and the Tramp from 1955 last week. We did, a couple days ago, we did Pinocchio, one of the original golden era Disney films. This is the last, I did a check while I was watching this, of how many original Disney films I have left to watch. And if you just do the Disney theatrical releases, the big ones, all the way through this year, Encanto comes out next month. And that's the 60th one, so that's kind of huge. This is the last of the Silver Age films from the 1950s. Post-war. So I have barely, I think, 13 movies left, and that brings us all the way up to things like Wreck-It Ralph and Zootopia and Princess and the Frog, things like that. But other than this, the oldest one that's left is The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, which is like 1949. So I'm kind of excited. I can't believe that we actually gone through that many. I've also done a check on how many Marvel films we have left, not counting this, the series and the cartoons and all the other stuff like that. Maybe a dozen Marvel things left, and maybe a half dozen Pixar things are left. So we've really gone through them, and then we have maybe 4 of the Star Wars saga films left. That's it. So it's crazy. And we're only 700. We just passed 700 the other day. Yesterday? Yeah. I don't know. I've lost track. Seriously. But yeah, it's kind of a big deal. 700. I've done over 825 hours worth of Disney Plus watching. Yeah. Kind of a big deal. I've recorded over 100 some hours. It's on the yesterday's or the 700th episode. The notes are there in the description. Anyway, Peter Pan. What can I say about this? It's a classic. It's a movie that mostly everybody knows, and even if you haven't seen it, you know what Peter Pan's all about. It's a guy in a green leotard who doesn't want to grow up. Basically, he lives in a Never Land and just, I don't know, in a world of imagination. And he hangs out with Tinkerbell, a little fairy, Pixie. And by the way, she is very much, I kind of forgot this, considering that how her solo movies recently, which I've seen a lot of so far, I think I only have one left, over the last 2 years. We've seen pretty much all of them. And she's obviously the hero. She's somebody to look up to. But in this, I just forgot how far she went in trying to kill Wendy. She's really jealous. There's a lot of, I don't know. I don't know who wrote, I can't remember who wrote this. I mean, obviously it's from J.M. Barrie and everything else. And Disney has their take on things. But this is beyond the racism from Native Americans. There's a lot of attitude when it comes to women and how they're all seem to be jealous of each other. I mean, Wendy's what? She's 11, 10? I have no idea. But she sleeps in the nursery with her younger brothers. The nursery? What is that? I mean, maybe that's what they call it for the room where kids sleep in London post-war? I have no idea. Or maybe it's pre-war. I don't know when this takes place necessarily. It's early 20th century, but or maybe late 19th. I don't know. Either way, yeah, she's all about. She's going to get her own room, and that normally for any girl who has to live with her little brothers would be like excited, but she doesn't want to grow up because she loves telling stories of Peter Pan. In fact, her and her brothers are all big fans of the stories that she tells of his adventures, and the boys act them out. They have a pretend sword battle as Peter Pan and Captain Hook, and they're much younger than she is, and they're boys with imaginations and stuff like that. And she's pretty much passed that along to them. She's a very imaginative young girl, and So they're already there's no mystery and like, oh, who are you? You're Peter Pan. What does that mean? Who are you? Who is Peter Pan? They already know who he is by the time he stumbles upon their home and trying to get his shadow back. By the way, yes, this movie is very old, and so I'm going to give you some spoilers. It's nothing that's huge because this isn't super big on plot. It's really more about sort of connecting a bunch of adventures together. They're not, they don't stand on their own necessarily, but it's a series of just scenes where conflicts happen. And I realize that's the summary of just about any movie that's ever released, but it just sort of has the same characters in each of them. I mean, there's a whole sequence that is just Hook and Mr. Smee. Smee, Mr. Smee. Hook and Mr. Smee. That's it. Just them dealing with the alligator. We learn that that Hook has a big fear of alligators. We learn that Mr. Smee is pretty much Smithers to Mr. Burns, where he's loyal to a fault, and even though he gets tons of abuse from Hook and the other pirates, but he suffers through it with a smile, and he's generally a good-natured person who just happens to be hanging out with pirates who like to cut throats and murder and pillage, but yeah, I mean, obviously Hook has a big what do you call it? He has a problem with Peter Pan because Peter took his hand and fed it to the gator, which he now has a rivalry with. So he got a taste of him, so he wants more. Apparently, Captain Hook is very tasty. But one of the strangest things in this is the fact that anytime Wendy shows up, and immediately Tinkerbell is jealous. She's a little fairy pixie girl. I mean, yes, her and Peter are best buds, and maybe she's in love with him. I don't know how that works. I don't know what's going on with that. But they're females, so they must be jealous of each other. And then, of course, Wendy wants to go visit the mermaids in the Mermaid Lagoon when she's visiting the island. And immediately she sees that the mermaids, are enamored with Peter, and she gets a little jealous. And then the other girls see Wendy, and the mermaids are all jealous of Wendy because why would you bring a girl here to our lagoon? And they start treating her like crap. and then there's the little Native American girl. But again, in this, they do give a warning at the beginning of the film that says, hey, there's some pretty shady depictions of certain cultures and people in this. They were wrong then, and they're wrong now. And we're keeping all this stuff in here. Hopefully it will lead you to a conversation and about why is it this depiction is wrong, why it's very outdated. Yes, we allowed a whole lot of stuff way back when, because I'm not going to get into that. You know why. But anyway, colonialism. Yesterday was, Indigenous Peoples Day. So in certain parts of the country. For some places, it was still Columbus Day. But that said, there's a song called Why is the Red Man Red? Yes, that would never make it past the first stage in a modern Disney film, unless Chappelle was writing it or something. I don't know. But there's a whole big number, and there's dancing, there's singing, and stereotypes galore, and yeah. And of course, a little Indian girl, little Native American girl. I'm going to say Indian because that's how it was depicted in this thing. We know it's an improper term, but yes. She was kidnapped by Hook. Peter saved her. Immediately, Wendy's jealous of her. And so, yeah, it's just, I don't know. There's lots of that's just the way women are. I guess they're all jealous of each other because Peter couldn't be a better guy that everybody wants. And he treats everybody like crap. So it's kind of weird that this is a classic in a number of ways. Yes, it's full of imagination, it's full of adventure, and it's understandable, especially during that time. You know, how we're all about the Marvel Cinematic Universe these days, or maybe the DC Universe, or Star Wars, and all these things like that. We have all these different movie franchises. We just finished with the James Bond film this past week. It premiered with Daniel Craig. So we have lots of modern mythology and that kids latch onto, and this is all, you know, franchises and branding and everything else. But for a lot of kids, they grew up with Star Wars, they grew up with Marvel, they grew up with all sorts of different things. They grew up with Disney, of course, and all the creatures, you know, with Toy Story and Monsters Inc. and things like that. So yeah, we understand that. But back in the 50s and before, even before that, there was no major franchises beyond things that devoted themselves to cowboys, like the Lone Ranger, or outer space, like Flash Gordon or Buck Rogers. Back then, pirates were big, cowboys and Indians were big, and monsters and aliens and spaceships and outer space, all that kind of stuff was big. And so in this thing, it's understandable that the boys have this kind of infatuation with, by the way, the island where the Lost Boys live and everything else. I'm pretty sure it's made out of the things that they love most. And apparently mermaids, they like mermaids. Pretty girls that are pretty much swimming around naked. One of them looked like Ariel, by the way. I wonder if the design of Ariel was intentional to look a lot like that one redheaded mermaid. I don't know. But of course, there's an Indian campsite on this island, which makes absolutely no sense. And why would London boys be really into that stuff? Well, that's just what the culture's provided for them, the stories that they've been given, and the things that they find adventure in. So yeah, it makes sense that their Neverland, their fantasy land, would be things that they find adventure in. The boys sleep all day. They get in all sorts of trouble, and apparently they're easily manipulated by Tink when she's jealous of another girl. She forewarns the Lost Boys to shoot down this flying bird called Wendy. And so they get their slingshots out and they start shooting at her, and she immediately loses concentration no matter how much pixie dust she has in her system, and she starts dropping towards some rocks. Of course, Peter saves her at the last second, but you know, he has to kick Tinkerbell out for basically attempted murder. Attempted murder of an 11-year-old girl at best, you know, 11-year-old girl who's just like, oh, he brought her there so that the boys would have a mom. Because it's kind of problematic in many ways. Yes, it's beautifully animated. It's actually really funny, especially the Hook scenes. I forgot how not menacing Hook is. He's more a comedic foil than anything. Yes, he's violent. He intends to blow up Peter and kidnap all the kids, or at least enlist them in his service to become pirates for him, which all the boys sort of just jump at. If Wendy wasn't there, they would all be pirates by now, because somebody sang a song about it. Basically, songs are like, I don't know, they can sway the minds of young children easily. I guess that's why Disney's in this business for so long. But anyway, yeah, it's a classic for a reason. Yeah, it's problematic at times, but it's still a sweet, fun adventure. None of it was meant to be cruel or insensitive to a culture, to Native American people. But it's a kind of thing where, hey, this might open some doors to talk about that and the things that are going on in this world, especially, again, with Indigenous Peoples Day just happening just yesterday. The world isn't as it was, and yet it's always been that way. Okay, I'm incoherent now. Let's pick now. Always. Sorry. Let's pick tomorrow's episode.
217.
217. I know I hold it there, we see it, I just want to hear her say it. Oh, okay. Well, we're back to a documentary. And, by the way, speaking of, at the beginning I spoke about all the different animated films. Like, I have 13 original Disney animated films left to go, and we just missed Hercules. So we're in the H's, but instead we're getting a documentary called The Hidden Kingdoms of China. I know some people would have preferred Hercules, but hey, we're doing everything eventually. Eventually we're going to get to Hercules. Whew. But The Hidden Kingdoms of China on the Disney Plus Everyday Challenge. I'll see you back here tomorrow with that.